I was an undergraduate at UC Davis and stumbled upon anthropology. I attended a field school and just fell in love with archaeology. It was hands down the best thing that I did. It started me on my path to being an archaeologist. And frankly, I really couldn't believe that I could make a living being outside and playing in the dirt, and I loved it. So after getting my BA, I went on to graduate school in Texas and studied African archaeology. My thesis work actually ended up being studying Iron Age settlement patterns in Mali, West Africa, and was very different direction than obviously California archaeology. So it was Chris Ryan that actually led me to Applied EarthWorks. He and I had attended Davis together and had maintained our friendship. He was working at Infotech at the time in Fresno and encouraged me to apply. I sent in a resume and Barry Price called me for an interview, and the rest is history from there.
I'm frequently asked about the most exciting or interesting thing I've found. I rarely even look at artifacts anymore, and instead I'm much more interested in the data that comes out of a site and what we can learn, more so than what we can learn about any single item. And people ask me what is the most interesting, exciting thing I've found. I usually bring up a house pit that we excavated at 35JA 100 in Southern Oregon. The house pit itself, we excavated actually several houses, but this one in particular was interesting because we found a smashed ceramic vessel on the floor. Realize at this time, and this site dated to about 1200 BP. At this time, the mid-1980s, we didn't even know ceramic existed in southwestern Oregon.
People want to know what's the most interesting or exotic site you've worked on, and especially non-professionals always want to know what's the most interesting artifact that you've ever found. And I have to explain to them that it's not about the individual artifacts that we find, it's about what we find out from those artifacts. For many years, my answer to that question about what's the most interesting site I've ever worked on, for many years, my answer to that was the Mostyn site. We started excavating burials that were being exposed 16 feet deep in the creek bank, and were able to rescue and remove and rebury quite a few burials, human remains of individuals who would have otherwise been washed down the creek and into the lake. And for many years, that was the most interesting site that I worked on because of the nature of the remains there, and the geoarchaeological context of the site.
One of the most memorable projects I worked on at Applied EarthWorks was the Tesoro Viejo Community Development Project in Madera County. And this was a pivotal project and pivotal sites in my career for many reasons. The project was along the San Joaquin River, and it had an extremely unique artifact assemblage, but it was also a very spiritual and meaningful place for the Dumna tribe. This was the location of their origin myth, and so the project allowed itself to not only work with the material cultural, but really understand the meaning of the material cultural for the people that lived there. Numerous groups were opposed to the project as well as the process that the county was taking, and it resulted in a number of lawsuits with the county that actually changed CEQA law, and I'm very proud to be a part of that. I have been so fortunate to have such an enjoyable career with Applied EarthWorks and worked on some really memorable projects. When I first started with Applied EarthWorks, I worked a lot on the Central Coast with clay at Vandenberg Air Force Base. And it was really Clay who taught me a lot about the field methodology and how to approach a site. And then over the last 10 years, I did most of my work centered in the Central Valley and the Sierra Nevadas. And I was fortunate to work on a number of projects within a region, you know, in close proximity, like Crane Valley, Fish Camp, and Yosemite National Park, that really allowed me to build upon my research and become an expert in the region.
My areas of expertise and my research interests have substantially evolved through time. After getting my master's degree from Oregon State and starting my own company, my geographic focus was on the Pacific Northwest and particularly Oregon. For several years, I was quite involved in the Great Basin archaeological community. I went to the Great Basin meetings, etc. Then when Infotech started the pipeline expansion project, it only minimally skirted the Great Basin. And my geographic kin necessarily diversified. Then when Applied EarthWorks started and I started working for them, my geographic focus shifted to the Central Coast. Not surprisingly, my research interests have evolved in tandem with geography. When I started working on California's Central Coast for Applied EarthWorks, the data potentials were much more substantial than what I was used to. For me, working on the Central Coast is kind of like a kid finding a cookie jar and mom's not in the kitchen. I've found and still find the archaeology to be exciting and fascinating. Not only are there great data potentials, but there is substantial and substantive archaeological work that has been done and it has been published. So there's a great deal of context for the work that we do. The work that we do could be put into that context. When you look at major journals, a high proportion of published articles deal with the Central Coast, and I've tried to do my part to contribute to our understanding of Central Coast prehistory, and I would not change my career path for anything.
I think that's the nice thing about Applied EarthWorks is there's so many opportunities like that, not only to help the company, but to help yourself in your career and as an archaeologist, and to make a name for yourself in your expertise